Hello and welcome to another GiantSlayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today I'll be looking at the current Top 5 comps for patch 12.5. The meta for Neon Knights has been all over the place in such a short amount of time thanks to the 12.4b patch that shook up the pre-existing meta, and now the 12.5 patch that had a ton of adjustments. With so many innovations in the meta, it's hard to pinpoint an exact top 5, but we're here to give that quick snapshot. Keep in mind this patch is a month long, and barring any B patches, the meta is likely to eventually settle down. For now, we're focusing on the current top 5, but as always, that may change. It's also worth noting that a lot of the top 5 comps are variations of specific synergies, and to cast a broad net on the meta, we're lumping a lot of those compositions together into their respective trades, such as syndicates or innovators. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. Before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Even though we wanted to put most of the synergy-related compositions together, we felt it necessary to split this first composition. Coming in at number 5, we have DRAVEN ZERI DEBONAIR. A few housekeeping things to take care of before we delve into the composition. First, whenever we're talking about a DEBONAIR composition, it's almost always going to be about the VIP. For this specifically, that means either DRAVEN or ZERI is the VIP. Second, DEBONAIR has two distinct ways of playing it: rerolling and late game. We'll circle back to the reroll variation later, but the reason we split them is the stark contrast in how strong the two variations are. Late game DEBONAIR boards are good, they're really good, but they aren't nearly as strong compared to the reroll version. Because of that, we're putting DRAVEN and ZERI at the number 5 spot on the list. These two champions can carry effectively into the late game, but there's inconsistencies for both of them that make winning difficult. It's also not as likely to top 4 as the reroll version. Now, let's focus specifically on the build itself. DRAVEN and ZERI do play out quite differently, with DRAVEN being the more likely carry to use. ZERI is amazing if you 2-star for the VIP buff, but realistically, 2-starring any 5-star is unlikely to happen consistently. That means we don't recommend trying to force VIP ZERI. Instead, flex into it when possible. The best way to do this is by playing a flexible board with champions like Jhin, Orianna in frontline, and then find the VIP ZERI and pivot into her. It's definitely possible to play ZERI off of a mid-game DEBONAIR board, but generally speaking, you're going to already have a VIP to play, and that's likely to be DRAVEN. It's rare that you'll find VIP ZERI at level 7 when rolling to stabilize. ZERI is also unique among the DEBONAIR champions, as she only needs 2 other DEBONAIR units, since activating the VIP buff is all that matters. This means you can flex in all kinds of champions in traits like Jhin for Sniper, Orianna for Enchanter Clockwork, and a solid frontline built around Braum and Morgana. A 2-star VIP ZERI almost doesn't even need a board to do well, but buying time and protecting her is the best approach. DRAVEN, on the other hand, is more standard to play. At level 7, find VIP DRAVEN, tossed in a few DEBONAIR champions. 3 works just fine for the VIP bonus, but 5 does add extra survivability. From there, you want Challenger and likely Clockwork for the bonus attack speed, since it scales well with DRAVEN. The goal with DRAVEN is all about maximizing his damage, so always positioning him in a way to snipe important units if possible, and be careful about any CC or assassins aimed towards him. All in all, DEBONAIR is one of the most flexible synergies in the current meta, and while rerolling is more consistent, both DRAVEN and ZERI are perfectly fine to play in the mid to late game. Let's move on to the next composition that's coming in number 4, Syndicates. Unlike DEBONAIRs, the two variations of Syndicates are relatively close in strength. The two most common builds are Ashe reroll or Ahri carry. Neither of them are going to outright win games, but top 4ing is definitely possible and where they shine in the meta. We considered putting Ahri into her own category, but on average, you're more likely to see Ahri with Syndicates than you are any other variation such as DEBONAIR Ahri or Arcanist Ahri. After the removal of Shaco and Akali, it did seem like Syndicates were doomed to fail in Neon Knights. But after multiple quality of life changes and a few buffs, both Ashe and Ahri have settled into their positions as carries for the trait. Ashe is a reroll build focused around spreading damage between her volley and Zyra stun. This composition is by no means the best reroll build in the meta, but it's relatively uncontested in most games. Whenever other players are rerolling, it becomes stronger. The value of Ashe is both in her damage and that her volley slows the attack speed of enemies hit. This is especially valuable against boards like TWINSHOT or Talon that rely on auto-attacking to do damage. The core champions for Ashe reroll are Ashe, Zyra, Morgana, Braum, and Darius, with Senna providing both Enchanter and Socialite. At level 8, you can add really anything you want, but Orianna and Jhin are the two most common, since that provides an additional Enchanter, Sniper, and Clockwork. Keep in mind that Morgana is also quite important for Ashe reroll because she's there to buy time in the front line, meaning you want defensive items for her. Braum is a great frontline champion, but he won't stall nearly as long as Morgana can. It's also possible to play a 7 Syndicate version of this composition if you have either an emblem or augments to support it. Ahri's variation is similar if you're aiming for at least 5 Syndicates with utility tossed in. The core champions in that case are Ahri, Braum, Morgana, Zyra, and Darius. Malzahar, Victor, or Vex can be used as the additional Arcanist, and Senna or Orianna are equally valuable as an extra enchanter. Silco can also be used in this composition primarily to boost mana champions like Victor and Orianna. The important thing to know about Ahri is you absolutely need either blue buff or Shojin to play her effectively. Ahri is all about scaling in a fight, and anything that slows down that ramp up is likely to lose you the fight, so make sure you have a mana generating item plus a solid front line. Another important aspect is making sure you either position Ahri in the top right second row or bottom left third row, as that's the best possible position for Ahri to do damage from. Overall, what makes Syndicate so effective in the meta is the high amount of defensive stats the trait provides on top of sustain. That means any boards with low damage or no armor pen will have difficulty chewing through the units, which buys time for sustain carries like Ashe and Ahri. Another composition with multiple variations is Innovators, which comes in at number 3. Nerf after nerf after nerf is not enough to dissuade players from running Innovators in every set 6 meta. That said, the synergy definitely took a hit as it's no longer a guaranteed win if you hit 7 Innovators. Instead, it's a flexible composition aimed around top 4 and with the potential to win if you super high roll. There are a lot of ways to play Innovators at every stage of the game. For now, we're going to focus on the 3 main versions, which Reroll, Jhin, and Standard. Which Reroll really got a breath of fresh air when Echo was given the Innovator tag. This means you can open by rerolling Twitch and Singed and pivot into 5 Innovators by the mid-game after you 3-star those 2 champions. The strength of this variation is how early it spikes in the game, as Twitch 3 packs a lot of damage for a tiny rat, and the Innovator summon provides a good amount of frontline and utility. It scales well due to Innovator, but since it's tied to a 3-star 1 cost, by the end game the composition will fall off. It takes an ultra high roll of hitting 7 Innovators with Twitch 3 to win games, and honestly that's rarely going to happen. The Jhin variation is closer to a standard board as you're simply playing 5 Innovators with Orianna and Jhin. Jhin is the main damage dealer, with Orianna and other Innovators adding supplementary damage. It's possible to run 4 Clockwork in this composition since Zilean is an Innovator, but the exact composition can go in a lot of ways. The idea is mainly about using the insane amount of utility both Orianna and Innovator champions provide to buy time for Jhin to snipe away the enemy team. Finally, Standard Innovators is mostly about a solid early and mid game and the potential high roll in the late game. It's preferable to generally pivot out of Innovators by stage 4 or 5 unless you're hitting 2 things. Those 2 things are Jace and an Innovator emblem. With that, you can then play 7 Innovators of familiar composition for anyone that played this board in previous metas. The value of this variation is all about the late game Dragon Summon. At the end of the day, the best way to utilize Innovators is mostly in stage 2, 3, and 4, as that's where the trait does well. Pivoting out of Innovators is much more common in this meta, but the 3 versions we just went over definitely help it remain as a mainstay in the current meta. Coming in at number 2, we have Twin Shots. Yeah, that's right, Twin Shot is suddenly a viable option in the meta. We admit we've been sleeping on this composition as it did show up briefly in 12.4, but we felt it was an outlier more so than anything. That is until the 12.5 patch did a few buffs that helped propel Twin Shots to the top. Once again, this is another synergy with multiple ways to play it, though it's a bit different than the other compositions on the list. Instead of being different variations, it's more like a choose-your-own-adventure type game. Want to play Corki with some Yordles? Go for it. Lucian to pew-pew a bunch? Yep, that's a thing. Mercenaries into Gangplank 3 Giga Chad? Ho ho ho, heck yeah! Even Jinx is playable, and we can't believe we're saying this, she is actually good. Like, quite good, and is probably the best 5-cost carry in the current meta. The point is, there's all kinds of way to run a Twin Shot board. All it comes down to is playing what you hit. Either you can reroll for the low-cost champions or wait it out and gun for Jinx 2 carry. Because Twin Shot goes up by 1 tier for each champion, it means that you can have 4 Twin Shot units in and it only costs you 4 board slots. Meaning you can play practically anything else alongside them, though generally it will be standard things like frontline and utility. It's worth pointing out that this composition is a top 4 playstyle. It's decent in the late game, particularly with Jinx 2, but it's not unbeatable. That said, you can definitely 20-20 this composition and climb quite effectively, because even if you're contested, there's multiple carries to play, so you're never fully blocked from playing Twin Shot. And finally, the number 1 composition for patch 12.5 is DEBONAIR Reroll. Specifically, we're talking about Talon Reroll, but honestly, Syndra or Brand Reroll also fit under this description. Both Syndra and Brand are less consistent than Talon, but they don't quite fit in with DRAVEN and ZERI, so we thought it best to lump them all together with Talon. Just keep in mind that rerolling either of those champions is an option, but if you're looking for the best of the best, Talon is the way to go. Rerolling Talon is possibly the best all-around composition to climb ranked with because it has an absurd top 4 rate. Even looking at the first day of the Innovation Cup, Talon had somewhere around a 65% to 70% top 4 rate with a decent amount of games played and still won games on top of that. Composition is simple, as all reroll builds are. Caveat is you absolutely must find VIP Talon, as this composition is not worth playing without him. Generally, it won't be too difficult to do, but sometimes he just won't show up, which is where rerolling Syndra or Brand swoops in to save your doomed game. As for the other champions, you're going to want DEBONAIR units and assassins. Items will be Infinity Edge, RFC, and usually Quicksilver, but the third slot is flexible. Position Talon away from getting bursted down, and chances are you will win the fight through his absurd amount of damage output. Consistency is what we're always looking for in a composition, and by far the most consistent composition in the current meta for sure is Talon Reroll. That's all for today, folks. There are plenty of other viable compositions in the meta, such as Malzahar Mutant, Socialite Aurelia, or Renata Bruiser. Really, there's something for everyone in the current meta, though we do expect to see that diversity slim down a bit as time goes on with such a long patch. By the end of 12.5, we'll most likely see more well-defined meta, but for now you can honestly play what you want. Let us know in the comment section below what your top 5 is and which of those compositions is your favorite. Thank you for watching. If you're enjoying our content, be sure to like the button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.